A few years back during Christmas time, I went on a Christmas photo shoot with my brother. We finished up our photo shoot and we were making our way back to our house when I asked my brother if we could stop by Walmart to get some snacks since I was hungry. He agreed, and we went and got some snacks, and then we started driving back home. As we were coming close to our house, we could hear police sirens and see red and blue lights. We drive into our street, and at the end of the street is a handful of cop cars, an ambulance, and firefighters by a house that usually has cops / first responders called to their home a lot. I was a little startled at first by the number of first responders there was, so I get out of the car and head inside my house. My older brother is sitting on the couch and I ask him what had happened, and he says Jess, who was my sister, was driving into our street and made her way to the back of the street, and as soon as she was driving, she looked at the house and saw a man hanging by a rope in his garage, with his garage open, garage lights on, and his truck's engine on and headlights on. I was so shocked to hear this because I'd never heard of something like that happen in our quiet little neighborhood in all the years I've lived here. Now, from my sister's point of view, once she's seen the man hanging, she thought it might have been a prank or a fake dummy hanging, but sure enough, it was a real man. She immediately called 911, and the first responders and police show up to question her about what she had seen, and she tells them everything. The crazy part about this is that the man's family was inside the house the whole time, and didn't notice him doing anything. It's sad, because if one of his family members checked up on him while he was in there, things might have turned out different. But that was just not the case. To this day, my sister still does not talk about this particular story, and we don't bring it up. First, let me say, I come from a somewhat unconventional family. We're all a little weird or wacky in our own way. Sometimes we get along great, and sometimes not so much. On Christmas Day, my parents and I usually stay home and don't see any of our extended family. However, this past year, we decided to go to my grandma's house. This is a little different because my grandmother and I have a very rocky relationship with one another. I have overheard my dad mentioning stories about my grandmother and my now deceased grandfather that bordered on child abuse. I remember being really young and my grandparents screaming at me for the smallest things, and my parents abruptly taking me home. But anyway, I'm now in my 20s, and my father decided since it was Christmas, we could give spending the holiday at my grandma's a chance. The day started out pretty uneventful, and dare I say present. A lot of conversations and happy memories. My dad and aunt were reminiscing about snowball fights and such from their childhood. There was a healthy conversation about politics, which I thought for sure would change the mood, but surprisingly didn't. After several hours and a nice dinner, everyone made their way to the living room for coffee, and to just hang out on the couches. I left my coffee on the kitchen table and made my way to the back of the house where the only bathroom was. I washed my hands, fixed my shirt, and walked out of the bathroom. When I walked into the hallway, I was greeted by my grandmother, who was just standing there staring at me. I said, "Hi, what's going on?" And I tried to keep walking, but she wouldn't move. Now this is a narrow hallway, and you're only fitting one across. "Excuse me, please," I said, semi-annoyed, and yet she still did not budge at all. Finally, she spoke up and said, "What do you think you're doing?" She sounded nervous and almost a little angry. "I was just going to the bathroom," I said, starting to get uneasy about the entire situation. She started to poke my chest and said, "Where is he?" At this point I was beyond confused. I told her I had no idea who she was talking about. Where is who? I finally shoved myself past her and started to make my way down the long hallway. That's when it happened. I heard her scream like a banshee and chase me down the hall. I turned around and she lunged at me with a small kitchen knife. She was trying to stab me. She just kept screaming, "Where is he? Where is he?" At this point she had fallen to the ground trying to take me down with her. After a minute of this, my father finally came running in with my aunt and lifted her up. I was too scared to use any force because I didn't want to hurt her, but I also didn't want to get stabbed. I was so angry and upset I started to grab my things, told my family I was leaving. As I made my way towards the door, she walked back in the living room and said in a calm voice, "Aw, where are you going? You haven't even finished your coffee." I just left and didn't even respond. This woman, my grandmother, tried to stab me, and I still have no idea why. The traumatizing events of this story happened to me several years ago. This is the first time I'm sharing my story publicly, in hopes it may help others who read it. At the time, I was a mother of a 4-year-old daughter. Her name is Juniper, and she is my entire life. The day of these events, my husband was at work, so we decided to do some Christmas shopping at the mall. On the way in, Juniper saw Santa sitting in the middle of the atrium and began jumping for Santa as we walked in. Since she associated Santa with presents, we decided to get in a line, even though it was pretty long. We could get a picture, and she could tell Santa what she wanted for Christmas. When it was finally Juniper's chance to sit on his lap, I immediately felt uncomfortable. I didn't like the way he was staring at her. His eyes were big and looked as if he had been taking drugs. She sat there for a moment and told the man what she wanted as I watched. After about 2 minutes, he got her off his lap and winked goodbye to her and said Merry Christmas. Happy that this ordeal was over, we did the little bit of shopping we had to do and pressed on with our day. While I was browsing around one of the clothing stores, I looked up and I thought I noticed the mall Santa sitting outside of the store where we were in. Not taking any chances, I grabbed Juniper and walked out of the other entrance of the store. After a little while longer of shopping, we decided to get some lunch in the food court of the mall. I kept my eyes peeled because I just had mother's intuition that something wasn't right. We were finishing our food, and literally, right as we were about to get up, the mall Santa came over to our table. He walked right up to Juniper and said in a jolly Santa-like voice, "Hey there, Juniper. Remember to be good so Santa can come and bring you lots of presents." She was so excited, and so were all the people around me. It's easy to say what you would do in that situation, but I just stood still. I thought freaking out my daughter and rushing her away from Santa would be a traumatizing event. So I grabbed her hand and told her it was time to go. She said goodbye to Santa, and we left. That night at home, I told my husband about the entire story. He was pissed off and upset, but agreed with my course of action. The next day, I woke up at about 8 a.m. My husband was already gone to work for the day. I happened to look outside and saw a strange blue car that I had never seen parked outside my house. This didn't really bother me, considering it could have been anyone, but it was just peculiar. At about 11 a.m., I looked out the window again and noticed the car was still in the exact same spot. I made the choice to go out to my mailbox in front of my home and investigate the car. The car was empty, except for the passenger seat. There was a Santa hat on the seat. I tried to not jump to any conclusions, but it just was starting to make too much sense in my head. I ran inside and called my husband. He said I was grasping at straws, but decided to come home anyway to make sure I was okay. A couple minutes later, my worst fear was realized. I looked out the window and saw the man in his car. It was the mall Santa. He was taking a picture of my house with a cell phone. Once he saw me, he drove away, and he drove away so fast I couldn't even get the license plate number. Minutes later, my husband came home, and I explained what I saw. We called the authorities, but there really wasn't anything that they could do. I felt angry for myself that I looked at the car all morning and couldn't even get a license plate number. My husband stayed home from work the next day just in case. At about noon, we walked around the house and noticed footprints outside of Juniper's window. Footprints in the snow that neither of us left. That night I couldn't sleep. I felt like I was just waiting for something horrible to happen. My husband, Juniper, and I all decided to have a camp out in the living room so she could be with us all night. Shortly after midnight, my husband and I were alerted to the sound of a car pulling up. It was the mall Santa car from the day before, and he was approaching the house with a giant bag in his hand. I called the police, and as my husband stalked him through the windows, the lights were off. so the mall Santa couldn't see us through the windows. He made his way all the way to Juniper's window. He started to tap on the windows, almost as if he was trying to wake her up. My husband stood on the other side of the window, trying not to scare him away until the cops came. That's when we heard it. "Hey Juniper, it's Santa! Come take a ride in my sleigh and I'll show you the reindeer." Praying that the cops would show up any minute, I sat in the fetal position, not knowing if this lunatic had a gun or any other weapon. He kept tapping and whispering, "It's me, Santa." Finally, the cops showed up, and when we heard the sirens out front, my husband jumped out the window and tackled the mall Santa. My husband yelled for the cops, and the cops detained the man. He didn't have any weapons on him, but his car did have duct tape and rope. It gives me nightmares to this day thinking of that horrible situation and what could have happened. My Christmas miracle is that my family is safe and my daughter didn't have to really experience any of the intense feelings my husband and I did over those couple of days. If you as a parent have instincts about the safety of your child, please follow them. If I would have just left the mall when I felt uneasy, I could have possibly avoided these entire series of events.